So welcome to you all to this presentation today, brought to you by our friends at Global Detroit on the topic of the power of trusted connectors, in micro enterprise development. My name is Anthony Salas, and I am the events director with Welcoming America. And just a few items before we do begin today. Some housekeeping items. The webinar is being recorded. And in the next few days, we will get you the link to the full recording via email and also share some of the resources and items that will be shared during the presentation. In an effort to provide a secure and welcoming environment during the presentation, any AI bots that will be used for recording will be removed. And we also, again, will be sharing that recording with you. So we will not have to rely on those. So again, those will be removed. If you need any technical help related to the platform, please use the chat feature that you've been using here and let us know, and we'll address those as soon as possible. And as the presentation is going on, we invite you to use the Q&A feature to enter your content questions. And we will be making sure we've got some time at the end of the presentation to address all or as many of the questions as we can. So for those of you that may not be familiar with Welcoming America, I'm going to take just a few moments to share a little bit about our organization and a couple of our key programs today. We are a national nonprofit organization of about 300 members of our network, and we lead a movement of inclusive communities working to ensure that everyone belongs and that they are value contributors to the success of those communities. And as I said, we've got about 300 members in our network, made up mostly of nonprofit and government organizations from across the country. Those members are benefiting from items such as expert coaching, strategy planning, and access to member-only events and resources, as well as diverse and practical communities of practice. If you do want to learn more about our organization, please go to welcomingamerica.org. And as I said, a couple of our programs that I want to highlight for you. The first is our Welcoming Standard. And this is a comprehensive roadmap that we have developed for communities to become more welcoming places. And the standard sets criteria or benchmarks that local governments, community organizations, residents, anyone can use to hold welcoming places accountable and really spur innovation. You see on your screen right now the 7 framework areas of the Welcoming Standard, and these really define welcoming places. They reflect the programs, the policies, the practices that local governments and community organizations can implement to ensure that everyone, including immigrants, feel that they belong. And again, if you want to learn more about our standard, we do have the QR code that you can scan from your screen there, and it'll take you to the page on our website. And again, we'll also include the link to the standard as part of the follow-up email that we'll send out after today's presentation. And then the other program to let you know about is our Welcoming Economies program. This is a program that provides a space for community leaders to convene, to learn from one another, and really deepen the work that they've already been engaged in. Proud to say that over the past decade, Welcoming America has worked very closely with Global Detroit to bring this program together and really support economic development opportunities for immigrants and refugees. Through this program, communities have advanced their local inclusion efforts by learning creative strategies through collaborative peer learning, generating deeper connections with peers in a confidential, trust-based environment, and leveraging a national network of experienced local practitioners as well as national partners to improve and inspire new and existing local initiatives. And last, they receive ongoing tailored support that helps local leaders stay on track and really meet their goals. So once again, too, if you want to learn more about this program, We have a specific QR code on the screen there that you can scan. Also want to let you know that we do have a number of plans in place that are going to be reflecting in our upcoming 2024 programming. And so I invite you to check back on this page throughout the year. If you're part of our network or if you're subscribed to our newsletter, you'll receive updates about that. But we are excited about things yet to come related to this program. So it is now my pleasure to get us into the content for today. I'm very excited to introduce you all to Steve Tabachman, who is the Executive Director of Global Detroit and the co-author of the report that you will learn all about today. And Steve has been a longtime partner and friend of Welcoming America. We are thrilled to have him and our other panelists with us today. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Steve.
Well, thank you so much, Anthony, and congratulations again on Welcoming Interactive 2024 in Dallas. It was an amazing 800-person event, and we look forward to working with you more closely as we produce Welcoming Interactive 2025. Get it on your calendars, May 20th through 22nd in 2025. But welcome everyone, our panelists and our attendees to this webinar on the power of trusted connectors in micro enterprise development. Just a word about Global Detroit. We are a regional economic development organization that focuses on immigrant inclusion as a superior growth strategy. And we run programs around opportunity neighborhoods, talent, entrepreneurship, and a whole host of other programs building an inclusive region. We believe that through the intentional inclusion of immigrants in our region's community and economic development strategies, policies, practices, and programs, we can be a high growth region and a more vibrant community for everyone. And so we've treasured our partnership with many people on this call, as well as with Welcoming America, to develop an emerging field of those who want to intentionally include immigrants in economic and community development strategies. And today's session is a reflection of that work. You're going to hear a lot more about how Global Detroit sort of stumbled upon and launched its Trusted Connectors program in going back almost 10 years. And so I'm not going to get into that, but I will say that after doing it for about a decade, we thought, it's really important to maybe tell this story, to document this practice. Trusted connectors probably, certainly predate our own work and have been around really probably for millennia and have been around in terms of community organizing, certainly for decades, if not centuries. But we decided that by looking across the country and documenting places where folks were specifically investing in communities to better connect small business, micro business, grants, loans, technical assistance, training to immigrant and other underserved communities. So the report is not limited to talking about immigrant communities, although today we're going to talk about the topic as it relates to immigrant welcoming. We thought that by documenting practices across the country, creating some standards around what our best practices and tips for everyone, whether you're a one-person welcoming office, whether you're a small business program that doesn't have a dedicated line item for equity and inclusion, there are tips and there are strategies in this report that will help you implement. And then we're really hoping that by doing so, we can increase the use of trusted connectors as a strategy, that we can increase funding for trusted connectors work, that we could make sure that as people develop small business, micro business, and economic inclusion strategies, that they include line items in their budgets for deploying trusted connectors, and that when they say they have a small business grant program, they actually build in timelines that think about the delivery system to get those grant opportunities to underserved immigrant communities. Secondly, we're hoping that out of this work and out of this study grows a network of trusted connector, maybe even a coalition that expands beyond just our region in Southeast Michigan or even beyond Michigan to include national folks like yourselves that are interested in this practice. And finally, as we did the research, we thought that there could be additional research topics outlined in the report that could help us. So the one thing I want to do, next slide, Anthony, is just spend a second talking about today's agenda. And then what is a trusted connector before I hand it over to our first panel. So our first panel is really going to get into what is a trusted connector, and then we're going to get into the actual report itself and what's in that report. Then we will get into your questions and answers, and then we have a quick poll for you all and some final thoughts. Next slide, Anthony. But I wanted to start it with what is a trusted connector? And so according to one of our funders, something called the New Economy Initiative, trusted connectors are organizations, and I would add, or they can be even individuals that maintain trusted relationships with small businesses through community-based engagement while focusing on specific geographies, population segments, and/or industry sectors. They typically refer small business owners to other resources and sometimes provide their own technical assistance services. So this could be a church, a mosque, a welcoming initiative, an ethnic community-based organization, the school PTA, and you're going to hear it could be an individual like a Muhit that I see up there in the upper left, who bring these opportunities. And again, we're talking today about how this works with small business and entrepreneurship programs, but I think there's a lot to be gained, and that this could be the same. You could use trusted connectors in housing strategies and in tax preparation assistance strategies and asset building strategies. And so with that, I have the great pleasure, you can move to the next slide, of introducing Dr. Elena Jackson, who I'm going to let introduce her panel, to talk about really what is a trusted connector. So Dr. Jackson has been with Global Detroit for about 16, 17 months. And she is a native born and educated Detroiter who left the city for a good, I think, almost 20 years, and then came back as a revitalization fellow and with a PhD in urban studies. And it took about 5 years of us sort of dancing together and recruiting, but to get her at Global Detroit, where she is our managing director, overseeing our Detroit work, our Southeast Michigan work, and our operations. She has tremendous international experience and has lived in close to a dozen countries and been an immigrant in those countries, working in those economies. She's married to an immigrant, and she's passionate about small business, about cooperatives, and about community engagement. And she is the co-author, and you'll meet our third co-author later in the webinar, but I'm going to turn over to Dr. Jansen for her panel about what is a trusted connector.
Thank you for that warm welcome, Steve. And it's great to see everybody today. I'm looking forward to really digging into today's topic with our first panel. We have on this panel Raquel Garcia, the Executive Director of the Southwest Detroit Environmental Vision, also a former team member at Global Detroit, where she was on the forefront of this as an emerging model, as a trusted connector herself, and helping us to better understand the parameters of that model and how this works within community. And we also have Gracie Xavier, the Executive Director of D-Artillery, also a former team member of Global Detroit, who helped to deepen our understanding and of the model of trusted connectors and how to expand that model to include even more specialized populations and historically vulnerable populations within community. And then finally, Mohit, the Associate Director of Business liaison with the Detroit Economic Growth Corporation. And there's a theme here, also a former team member of Global Detroit who helped to grow and expand our understanding and refine our model of trusted connectors. And so with this panel, we're going to dig into the mechanics of the trusted connector model. I'm going to start off with Raquel. Raquel, if you could explain how Global Detroit got started in this trusted connector space.
Hi, everybody. Just want to say that something that Steve said just threw my notes out. So if I'm hoping I'm not, there's a lot here, but so I joined Global Detroit. I had been working on immigrants' rights and a lot of sort of community building, voter registration. Um, and, so I think one of the things that I was thinking at that moment when this was sort of emerging and I was applying to come on board and become a team member, how we often work in liberation work, but we don't ask them, how are you doing? How is your house? Do you have a roof, and how is your job? And, there's additional questions, not just, we're focused on profiling or something like that. And so joining Global Detroit, we had a lot of that in mind. We were asking lots of questions. Are people utilizing lending? Are they buying homes from the land bank at the same rates as other people? Are they participating in school meetings? They just had lots of questions. And so, and how are they doing? Are they utilizing all of the business resources that were happening at that moment in Detroit? If people remember, maybe we have a lot of national people, but we had like Goldman Sachs, like a grant. We had grants from New Economy Initiative. Like, so many resources were cropping up because I think it had already been proven that neighborhoods that had a lot of small businesses were employing a lot of people. People could walk to work. They weren't getting hit as hard when we would have a downturn in Detroit. Like, we've seen a few in Detroit. So we would notice that, that's Steve Bachman's work. But I think there was a question, how we know that this is true. How do we help people access more resources? How do we support people, and ask them what are you dreaming about, and how do we help you get those resources? At that time, NEI, New Economy Initiative, approached us, and they also had a grant and had noticed that there were a lot of applications all over Detroit, but not in the corridors where we saw lots of immigrants, and so, they invited us to support that work. We very excitedly said yes. And this was the second year of NEI Ideas 2015. And we were able to get applications from 6 in the area to 21. So that's an increase of 350%. And then we partnered with them, for 3 more years up to 2018. And we expanded that work. I remember very fondly starting in Southwest, literally walking around with friends and clipboards and walking the corridors to other corridors, McGraw, and then up in Northwest Detroit, and 7 miles, 6 miles, just really expanding the work. And we were able to help 200 entrepreneurs apply, and there was 57 finalists. And 10 winners for the $10,000 grants. So that was just an amazing moment, amazing time for us.
Yeah, that is amazing. And beyond the numbers, right? Every number represents a person, a household, a transformative experience. I'm wondering if you have in mind any one of those past award winners that would be, beneficial for the group to hear about.
Well, there are so many, but one of my favorites, there's a couple, is Myra, and she's a local business owner here who has a very healthy, juice bar, and had a clothing store. And I think we have a picture of her somewhere. But I think what I learned from Myra, is
Actually, there you go.
Oh, okay, great. For example, she already owned that little, luckily she was able to buy that little space, before property values shot up in Detroit and everybody came to buy. And so she already owned it, and her husband's very handy. And so all of the work that you see in the photograph is by them. But she wanted more. She wanted to engage with the city of Detroit. She needed permits to, handle food. She needed to learn how to grant write and, apply for other grants and loans, and she was a Prosperous Detroit graduate, but still had lots of questions. She still wanted relationships, for example, with our Department of Neighborhoods here. She wanted to know how to buy the lot next to her already owned, little business, little building. She wanted to engage with other nonprofits. Like there's a mural now, a really beautiful mural on her building that somebody, she partnered with. She wanted to meet other organizations so that she could cross-pollinate and, support them and be supported so that when people order food for a meeting, there she is, right? We're trying to create a circular economy here in Southwest Detroit. And so, she's also just an important, very prominent pillar, a Spanish speaker, who is now teaching other people, connecting other people. So she now is an information source for other people and an example. She also, and this is how it works, it's just all connected. She also was a renter, and someone purchased her house in one of the auctions and was had 2 months to move out. And Global Detroit helped her buy another house through another auction, because so we became that kind of information source for her. She was like, "What do I do?" We were often, and I get teary-eyed, the first people call, because we just knew everybody. Or if we didn't know, we would call people, we would knock on doors, or we would ask people, we would email and get responses back. So, and I think that just, thinking about what it is to be a trusted connector is like, how do we operationalize this, right? And so, there's a lot of, as Steve said, there needs to be an investment, from funders and from other organizations. We need to hire in from the neighborhood, which means that there's additional training, additional investment in that person. I have experienced, hiring people from not the neighborhood, and they're great, but they go home and they kind of forget about the issue at hand. But when it's your neighbor, you're awake at night with them, wondering, how am I going to help solve this problem? And I think, really being intentional, one of the things we've talked about a lot is, just asking a lot of questions. How do you get your news? How do you exchange information with other people? And what works for them, and really understanding that there's a variety, and really welcoming that and learning from that, and not sort of demanding that they get information the way we like it. Like really understanding that we're so different and coming from so many different places, and so valuable because of that, and because she's connecting with other people that I probably can't connect with. And so it's like creating this snowflake model of connectors and information sources, where we can learn from each other.
No, you're mentioning some really important things. Some of the things that I'm coming away with from what you shared, the importance of going into community, being welcomed into community, honoring how they connect, honoring how they exchange information, and recognizing that no community is a blank slate. There are already resources and knowledge there. And how do we connect what we know with who they are and where they are, and invest in them further so that they can invest in others further. I'm wondering, Mohit, if you have a similar story, or have had any similar experiences given the work you've done on the ground in in communities around Detroit as well.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Dr. Jackson, for the opportunity to speak on this panel today. And everyone, see a lot of familiar faces. So I started this work with Global Detroit in 2016, the month of June. Literally 4 months after I landed in the US and in the city of Hamtramck here. And I was recruited by Global Detroit to do their Banglatown project, Campo Davison Banglatown project. That's how it was named, after the first initial phase for the Opportunity Neighborhood program. So yeah, I also can think of, so totally agree 100%. My work started with Raquel with Global Detroit, and totally agree with everything that she mentioned. We find similar stories, be it in Southwest Detroit, be it in Banglatown, be it in any other immigrant populated neighborhood. We have this similar story, and we are really uh, uh, fortunate to be able to work with this population and connect them with the resources that are necessary. So yeah, just the picture is for Mr. Rizal Chaudhry, Rizal Karim. He is one of the NEI award winners, the $10,000 grant that he received. So he was not, it took us about 4 or 5 attempts before he even or he is even convinced to apply for this funding, because in our community here, people think there is nothing free in the US. When you tell them about a grant, first of all, they will say, okay, what is the interest rate? How am I going to pay? How much time I'm going to have? Then we have to break it down for them, saying that, okay, this is the money that you don't have to pay back. You have to apply if your idea is unique and it's really help growing your business, so you'll be getting the funding. So let us help you submit the application. So we work with them. There are a lot of barriers we get into. Like first of all, there are I would say language barrier. That's the prime issue that we have. Also, we have some social barrier as well, depending on where people are coming from that specific country that they're coming from. Not all the people are coming from the urban neighborhood. They're coming from countryside or village area. So there is always that shyness in them that they cannot really open and discuss their issues and concerns. So someone like me, when I'm at their door, so that makes it a bit easier for them. Looking for someone who could connect at the door, at the shop, with these businesses and the residents where we can do the work. So it's really trusted connector is really a key for this kind of work that Global Detroit does, and all the other organizations who are here today listening to us for any immigrant populated community or neighborhood.
It sounds like you got involved in this work really early on, moving to the city, which I didn't realize it was just 4 months after you moved here. I knew you were a rock star. I didn't know to what extent. That's amazing. And you've now, I'm guessing, have leveraged that experience into some other organizations. I mean, one thing that, while I was, silently stalking Global Detroit, trying to figure out how I could join the team, I noticed that people left here and went on to do these amazing things. And it sounds like you followed that pattern as well. How have you leveraged this work with Trusted Connectors into work you're currently doing now?
Yeah, so currently, as you know, I'm with the Detroit Economic Growth Corporation. It's a quasi-governmental entity with the City of Detroit Economic Development Division. So we work in conjunction with the mayor's office and the Detroit City Council. We provide economic development support and work. So it's really interesting to see how the work that Global Detroit has started in 2010 and getting into the neighborhood and hiring the different language speakers into the different communities and neighborhood, and how this has become. I know Steve is saying now they're rolling out this, how this practice and documented this practice of Trusted Connector and how this really worked. But I think the work has really taken off. Like it's really taken off, like I would say, since 4 or 5 years back, because I see myself where I am today because of the work that I did with Global Detroit and the connections that we made. We worked, like I was mentioning about Department of Neighborhood, that we worked with them. They're part of the city's mayor's administration. So they saw this is important and this work is important, and we need to be intentional. Mm-hmm. I always say that whenever I meet someone and see that, if you want to bring any change, if you want to be the difference maker, first of all, the first thing you have to do is being intentional. And Global Detroit was being intentional from the get-go. But we are rolling out this report now. But as I said, the work has really impacted a few years back. When some of an organization like DEGC and in government like City of Detroit, they chosen. So I'm working in District 3, Council District 3. I'm also the associate director of the program. And I have two more colleagues, who are in District 7, which is a Yemeni populated community, and also District 6. We have another colleague, which is predominantly a Latino community, where we have so the city, the different agencies, they all see the work that was done, that was laid out. So Global Detroit really laid the groundwork, and so we are growing from there.
I appreciate the pattern I'm beginning to see emerge from both what Raquel and Mohit have both described around leveraging trusted connectors in the community to expand resources, knowledge, and access across other opportunity systems within the ecosystems we're trying to break down barriers within. But what really struck me was this idea of intention. And I want to bring Gracie into the conversation. She's someone with whom I've worked personally and know that she operates and acts with great intention, even looking for communities within community. And so, Gracie, I'm wondering if you could share a bit about your work as a trusted connector and how you have integrated that intentionality specifically into your work with working with refugee women.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. I want to piggyback off what Mohit was saying in regards to Global Detroit really setting the foundation for this work. It's not the work that we all are not doing. I think what I appreciated that the team did at Global Detroit was coin a word. And not those words, we hear a lot of words that become trendy over time, but doesn't have any real meaning to it. I think for us, we were already doing the work and we just needed the word that would help us really summarize what was being done by our partners, by individuals, and by community networks. So when trusted connectors came to the forefront of the work we do, I think we all had an Oprah moment and was like, aha, that's it, right? And so with Global Detroit and myself being an immigrant, one thing is always important to me, and I think that's what trusted connectors represent the most, is cultural competency. I think when you are working in communities that are different from the main street or are new to communities, it brings a level of comfort when you can speak to someone that is representative of your culture or is very culturally aware of where you are coming from. And so I like to say, for me, if you read the report, all these things are highlighted, but I wanted to bring them back up for this conversation. For me, trusted connectors play 3 roles in community and play 3 roles in the work that I'm doing right now, is they're boots on the ground. They represent not only the community, but they sit as the middleman in a lot of ways. Partly due to, especially if you're thinking about a small business owner, especially if it's a 1-2 person shop, they may not necessarily have the time to attend all the plethora of meetings that different organizations are doing to do focus groups, come and learn about this new loan and all of those things, right? But if you're part of that community, you definitely can help disseminate the information that the community needed to know in order to take advantage of the resources that are coming down the pipeline. We really saw this highlighted, especially around COVID, where you were seeing a lot of financial interventions coming up for businesses alike, but we were finding out that immigrant businesses, sometimes if you weren't connected already to an organization like a Global Detroit, you were missing out. But if we were able to recruit and galvanize those individuals, trusted connectors in the community through the way they communicate. And that was very important that Abdul and Raquel highlighted that. We were able to support these business owners by making sure we were getting information to them in the WhatsApp group, in the ethnic newspaper, right? Or meeting them at their restaurant to actually complete that application. The other things for me, trusted connector work is communicate, partner with the community and other trusted connectors. Because a lot of times, especially the further up or the bigger your organization gets, it's sometimes you're a little bit removed from the everyday community member or groups, right? And if you are able to connect to a trusted connector that is already a leader, a vetted leader in that organization, then you're able to still get, I guess, real-time information of what's working, what's not working, where are there gaps, and where can then I support. And then, of course, for me, the biggest thing is I believe trusted connectors are advocates, advocates for their community, advocates for their organization, and able to help amplify the voices of the communities they represent when they necessarily may not have a seat at the table. So they're able to represent and speak for that, because sometimes we often bring interventions thinking that it may or may not work. But if we're not speaking directly to the individuals, how do we know it's working? And I think listening and having these, I think, agents of change and to relay information both to the community and the organization, we can then bring interventions to the table that are more responsive and intentional to the problems and challenges that these communities are facing. I think I might have eaten all of my time, but in doing that, though, it has brought me to the work that I'm doing now, which I started at Global Detroit. We were working in neighborhoods, in a lot of business owners, a lot of immigrant communities that through culture, language, all the barriers that are highlighted, we're not connecting to a lot of the women in the community. And during the time, it started with the Banglatown study, and we were curious, how can we then connect with those communities? I come from a background of art, and Global Detroit was gracious enough to trust the team in piloting using art as a way to connect with a community that we weren't having represented or listened to. And we did a textile, it's a basic textile workshop, but the information we learned from connecting to that and not only did the women appreciate that they had a program that was designed to connect women, especially Muslim and non-Muslim, together and creating this woman-only safe space, then we discover what some of the needs and challenges were, because before we weren't getting that information. And so we can bring in interventions that was more responsive. So like Aina, that they're showcasing here, is a group of Bangladeshi women who attended the textile workshop just to attend a textile workshop. Then through that, over time, we built the trust for them to really feel comfortable to explain, it's not really sewing that I want to do. We really want to start a business, but we don't know how to do that. And so just finding that information, we were able to connect them to the groups that they needed to support them in starting their event planning business.
You know, there's so many things you're saying. We could go in 5,000 different directions. One of the immediate things that comes up to me goes back to what Raquel said around, getting to know the person and asking the bigger questions around who you are, what you need, what are you experiencing, and letting that be the guide. Because I think one of the biggest pitfalls we as smart people fall into is this idea of that somehow because we are smart, it means that we know things. And a smart person really knows that what they have are more questions, not necessarily more answers. And so I think part of what I'm taking away from you is the importance of working with and not doing things to or for people, but working with them, and of really leaning in with curiosity and asking questions. And in doing so, it sounds like part of what you uncovered through your Trusted Connected work was seeing some of the populations embedded within community that may have been overlooked before, that may have been previously kind of invisible in some of the larger scale and bigger work. And so I'm wondering if you could talk just a little bit more about that. You've already touched on it a little bit, but even when you think about African Americans in some of these same communities that also are feeling overlooked, how have you incorporated this idea of trying to see and find the invisible and bring light to the needs there and incorporate them in this work as well?
Yes, I think one of the biggest thing, it's old fashioned community engagement 101, meet people where they are, right? You're going to go to the mosque, you're going to go to the home and have tea, you're going to go to the neighborhood block club. It sounds so simple, and a lot of us do it, but sometimes we do it on a focus group. Sometimes we do it with a survey. Sometimes we do it by sending a flyer to the event. And one of the things I find that may work sometimes, but if you really are a trusted connector, to build that trust, it takes time. And it takes time because the community needs to know you are really invested, because a lot of these communities that we're vulnerable communities, Elena said that we're working with, have seen this race before and often is very hesitant to new organizations coming in with a great new idea. So I think meeting folks where they are over time really helped. And that did with the work we did with East Davidson Village. So East Davidson Village is catty corner to the increasingly Bangladeshi neighborhoods that are expanding in Detroit and Hamtramck and have their own natural anxiety, and also feeling that they're left out in some of the interventions coming. So it started with just attending neighborhood group meetings and just sitting there and observing and not really offering any solution, but coming to the solution with the community and supporting them and connecting to the resources to bring their vision to fruition. And I think that's very important, because as doers and helpers and servant leaders, we are quick to want to, help. But one thing I have to say is it's better to take your time and let the community bring you where they want to be, because sometimes we can introduce interventions to communities when they are not ready or have the resources ready to really take advantage of the intervention, right? And so it becomes a missed opportunity when, if we took our time and we worked with the community to set up the 501c3, get their board ready, then when they do have an opportunity to win the 200,000 grant to build their community hub, then they are better situated to really leverage that opportunity to create the change they really want to see in the community and in their environment.
This is great. We are at time, but I'm going to take a little bit of liberty, if we can, in 1 minute, go around and just answer, where do you begin to find trusted connectors? Given everything you shared, my sense and instinct is that these folks are in the communities of everybody that's on the call. If somebody doesn't know how to recognize who a trusted connector is, if each of you could just round robin, where do you even start? Where do you start? Where do you look? Where are these folks or organizations?
I'll start since the mic is hot. I think we all know the big ones, church, community group, the neighborhood block club. But for me, it's the individual in that community, because sometimes there's a lot of individuals that are not connected to any organization, to any church. And sometimes they fall through the crack. So sitting in the neighborhood coffee shop and just talking to an individual, you can find out a lot of information, even about that community. So then you can know how you can better support that individual and the community at large.
Okay, thank you, Raquel. It looked like you were going to go.
Yeah, and so I would say it's surprising. I would echo what Gracie is saying. You go to a community meeting and there's 2 or 3 people that are usually kind of already sort of holding court, or whatever. But most recently, one of my neighbors, we were experiencing a lot of traffic violence in right literally, down the street from my house. And she just blossomed, we were like, let's have a meeting with the city. And, that was a surprise. And she ran with an email, and then that leads to another email. And all of a sudden she's like holding these like community meetings. And I'm like, let's go canvas. I mean, I was like, let's go, let's talk to people. What a great opportunity, because if you canvas and you say, I'm here to help you, it feels kind of weird because you're like, I don't know, why would you assume I need help? Like, but when you come to the door and you are, you have a very specific thing you're working on, or something that we think they're experiencing with you, because, this was a specific neighborhood experience, but you find that people are either receptive, or maybe on the third knock, the third time you talk to them, but she just really came out of nowhere. And so, I go to a lot of meetings, a lot of community meetings. And, I feel that what I've taken away from the work and what I do now is I'm ready. So when somebody is ready, I'm like, hey, let's talk, like there's a place for you. Like there's a community, like, do you want to talk to the Department of Neighborhoods? Do you want to, who do you want to talk to? And they become more energized, they're usually energized already, and they become more energized. And we're here to support, especially on, the work that I'm doing, I feel it's connected to, or, related to the same work, because I feel that, that I feel like I'm still being the trusted connector. I still am, in that role in a different sort of environmental way. But, I think, it's not always a person holding court. It could be someone else who's just ready to be activated, and it just takes the investment, that, the time to have those conversations, and and be beside them, and see what they want to do.
Okay, so we should keep ourselves open to trusted connector emerging from any space within the community, and not get too fixed on labels or what we think it's supposed to look like. Mohit, I'm going to give you the last word here for the crew.
Yeah, I would agree with Gracie, what she mentioned about the neighborhood coffee shops. That's what I was thinking exactly too, where we get to meet. It's a Bengali cultural thing that we get to see people are here. We don't see much, like not a lot of outside market, like on the street market. There is not a lot like there is not like that. We have some food trucks different places, but back home we have this tradition, like anywhere you go, like you will find in any corner of the street, you will find people are gossiping, and they're talking about politics and talking about the society and this and that. That's a easy place to find those connectors and to work with them. They really have deep knowledge about the area, the community. I want to provide an example here. So right now, Rizal Chaudhary is the community organizer working with Global Detroit. So when I started working, and as I mentioned, I came new here, and I didn't know him at that time, right? So because of the work that I did, and we became friends, we did a lot of work together. He was volunteering with our work, and then now after I left, he kind of being that person and working. So it's like being out there and making those relationships and connections, and be open. What Raquel was mentioning, that, and be open to conversation and letting people listen to people, and connect them with the right resources.
Well, this has been really enriching. I just want to say thank you to our first round of panelists for that introduction to, but also grounding within the Trusted Connector model. And what I can also say, Raquel mentioned, thinking of herself as still being a trusted connector. If there was any question or uncertainty, all of you definitely still are. And just know that I know that I personally plan to call on you to support this growing body of work in Detroit. So please don't think that you'll ever be able to fully set that role or that title aside. I'll find you. Okay. You all are definitely still trusted connectors. So thank you so much. We're going to move into the second part of our discussion today. I'd like to introduce Noor Edie. Noor is the daughter of an immigrant small business owner, and she's actually the lead researcher on our Trusted Connector study. it was interesting. It was a part of her fulfillment of her master's in public policy, which has now blossomed into a full-time role with Global Detroit, now as a special project manager. And that's how we do at Global Detroit. Once you are a part of the crew, once you're a part of the family, you always are. And so Nora is now on board with us full-time, which we're really excited about. It gives us more time to roll out the research and the impact of the work that she's done through this research. So she's going to discuss some of the learnings from this research effort. I'm going to turn it over to you, Nor, if you could begin just by telling us about those major findings from the work that you led here.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jackson. And thank you, Gracie, Mohit, and Raquel. I interviewed you. You all helped me write this. And every single time I listen to this panel, I'm like, wow. And I feel like I shouldn't be surprised at this point, but it's always really great, wonderful to hear you all share your stories. I mean, you all wrote the playbook. We just typed it out. And you know, since I've been at Global Detroit, Gracie, several times people are like, you need to go talk to Gracie to get this done. And so you all are still so prevalent in the community and continuing to do this work and continue to be trusted connectors for us at Global Detroit. And so I'll start by kind of sharing the purpose of why we did this report. Elena, can we get the next slide, please? So really the purpose of the report was to build awareness for the need of investing in people and organizations who, as Gracie mentioned, are meeting people where they are in community spaces, in their homes, in their businesses. We wanted to document the untold story of trusted connectors as a vital strategy to moving the needle on equity and access for small business owners. Although many small business programs are designed to assist underrepresented communities, too often these programs are not reaching, the populations they're supposed to. And this is largely because there's less intentionality with the delivery method to connect underrepresented and or immigrant entrepreneurs to opportunities. And really that's the focus of the Trusted Connector report, is to share this as a strategy to improve the delivery models of programs. And we're hopeful that this research will help organizations, funders, and governments understand the importance of investing in these connections, to create new programs that incorporate trusted connectors, and to build a network to learn from one another to better understand and communicate around best practices and measuring the impact. And so in the next slide, really at the forefront of the report, we set the foundation that there is an equity gap, both in the country, but as well as specifically in the small business ecosystems. And the equity gap, there is an equity gap in business ownership by entrepreneurs of color, as well as in the delivery of support programs, and the gap in entrepreneurs of color accessing those programs. And this is really parallel and resembles what we see in the wealth gap, as well as the home ownership gap in comparison for people of color compared to their white counterparts. And so 90% of entrepreneurs of color own micro enterprises with less than 10 employees. Black Americans only own about 2.3% of employer-based businesses, while being 14% of the population. And we see this trend when we look at other communities of color as well. And so really what we wanted to do, a big part of the start of the report focuses on the Paycheck Protection Program and analyzing that as one of the largest relief programs that came down from the federal government. It was billions of dollars coming down from the federal government in a time when it was really needed to support and save a lot of small businesses in a really dire time when they were experiencing some of the worst outcomes due to shutdowns, due to changes in how they have to deliver their businesses. And when we look at the Paycheck Protection Program, although it was intended to reach small businesses, it failed in reaching micro enterprise businesses owned by people of color. And so a lot of the things that we identified as disparities by the structure of the Paycheck Protection Program included that the Paycheck Protection Program required a pre-existing relationship with an authorized lender. There was also information gaps. Really larger small businesses, because the SBA identifies small businesses as any business with 500 employees. So larger small businesses who were equipped with accountants and other financial departments were more equipped to submit these applications a lot faster. The PPP algorithm also favored large firms because it was designed to retain employees on payroll. And there was also a delay in approving sole proprietor eligibility. So by the time that sole proprietors, which are predominantly micro enterprise owners, that is how their businesses are structured. By the time that they were eligible to apply to PPP, the first round of loans were deteriorated, like they were gone by the time that they were able to apply. Third, not third, but down the line of disparities, there was also the eligibility and documentation requirements and disparities in loan forgiveness that occurred. And so there is stories documented by entrepreneurs of color who applied for PPP, where when it came time for forgiveness, micro enterprises were not receiving the forgiveness that they thought they were going to when applying for PPP. And the report really goes in depth into why this is. And we did a really good job synthesizing the information that is out there on how PPP affected communities and how it kind of came out. We did a really good job synthesizing that into the background and creating the foundation as to why Trusted Connectors would have been a really great resource to use in addition to PPP. And so moving on, I think we'll look at a few models, if I can get the next slide. So the Global Detroit model is really the model that we've heard a lot about so far from Gracie, Mohit, and Raquel. It's one of the core models of the report. And it was really Global Detroit paying residents to visit small businesses. And these weren't residents who had a background in business necessarily, but folks who would be trained to go out to businesses, canvas, as Raquel said. I love hearing that Raquel is still canvassing. And they would canvas small businesses and support them in submitting applications to various opportunities. But Trusted Connectors were not the ones processing these loans, but they had the connections and they had the trust and the linguistic ability to sit with small business owners and help them complete their applications. And so I won't spend too much time on Global Detroit because I think we got to hear a lot from our incredible panelists, and I'll actually move on to our second model, which is the Neighborhood Development Center model. So NDC is a business service organization. It's a business support, it offers business support programs. It is now part of the larger Build From Within Alliance, who are our co-authors on this report as well. When NDC is training small businesses, they typically do around 11 small business training sessions for entrepreneurs and offer 10 hours additional of one-on-one. They do this by working through community partner organizations, and they work with the community partner organizations to host these business training sessions in community spaces that folks are familiar with. And, the community organizations really have the list of community organizations that NDC works with is pretty variable. There's, you can work with business associations, you can work with community development corporations, you can work with the mosque, you can work with the health center. Again, I think one key thing is the connections take priority, and then the training kind of comes in second in this work. So any place that would be trusted, that is accessible, that is culturally competent and linguistically accessible. And then NDC would work with these community-based organizations together. They would identify who the business trainer would be, and then they would also, the community partners, support NDC in recruiting and identifying the entrepreneurs who are going to participate in the program. And so the community partners for NDC have been a really great anchor for their programming in the Twin Cities region. And this has really supported NDC. The community partners have really supported NDC in bringing in loan applicants and identifying people who need additional technical assistance. And so this is a great resource. The community partners are a great resource to refer entrepreneurs in the community to NDC for support, and that allows them to extend their services out into the community. And that is really the NDC model that has now been also adopted by the larger Build From Within Alliance, which is around 17 member organizations who all are doing this work through a 4-pillar model across the country. And so in the next model, we'll really look at the New Economy Initiative. And what's really cool about the New Economy Initiative is they're a philanthropic collaboration, and really they are leading this work from, in 2022, NEI invested $1.25 million into 12 different Trusted Connectors in Wayne County. And these were folks who these were organizations like an Arab American Women's Business Association, Global Detroit, and again, they can be organizations that do business programming directly, or they're really well connected. And what NEI did, and NEI runs their own, I think we mentioned this, that when Raquel came on, she was supporting folks in submitting NEI grants, or submitting, their applications to NEI for funding. And they really were the ones who realized, we need to supplement our program with this trusted connector model in order to increase applications. And so they were really leading by example and doing this within their own programming. And NEI is setting the example of how to invest in delivery system of programs. They have the programs, but then in addition, they expanded their work to include a greater investment in the delivery model and how they reach the communities they were hoping to reach in order to pull them in and have them submit their applications. And I think they set a really great example for other foundations and other folks who want to run, small business lending to communities of color, including that piece on trusted connectors has been really wonderful to work with NEI, to work with people who believe in this so well that they were, facilitating their own programs. So I think next we'll talk about the International Rescue Committee. And the International Rescue Committee was part of, they were one partner who received the SBA Community Navigator pilot program. And their proposal really looked to connect 20 local partners, majority of the partners being selected for their deep community roots over their small business backgrounds. So IRC recruited these organizations and trained them with the small business know-how, knowing that they cannot replicate the connections, but the information was transferable. The community partners that they recruited then helped connect entrepreneurs to opportunities within IRC, as well as local CDFIs and a plethora of other state and local initiatives and opportunities that folks could access. So 2,300 small businesses were supported in this program in strengthening their skills and increasing their capital access with about 16,500 hours of technical assistance distributed. And so this is, again, really wonderful to be focusing on connections and knowing that we can train folks, but the value of being connected and trusted and having access to communities is really where our focus should be. And so this is a great segue into the next slide, because the next one really talks about another really big goal of the report was to offer some measures and metrics of, well, how do you know if this program is working? How do you know if this program is successful? And I broke it up into a few buckets, but these two buckets that we start out with the outreach to minority entrepreneurs and the increased use of business support services, are what a lot of the folks that I had the opportunity to interview said they focused a lot of their time on. For anyone who's interested in starting a Trusted Connector program, really the measures that you're going to be most interested really need to align with what your goals are for the program. Your goals may not be to cover all of these components, but regardless, depending on what your goals and objectives are of your program will really depend on what measures you should be utilizing. But the programs that I looked at and the programs that we had the opportunity to interview really emphasized the amount of time and investment that folks spent in these two buckets specifically. In these two brackets, folks said that they spent years building and deepening connections, building and deepening the presence of these organizations and these trusted connectors in communities. This is where they took probably their most time. And these are really direct engagement and direct action. So the magnitude of these measurements will really result in stronger programs and prepare the program better for the broader outcomes, which come later. I think it'll be a while before anyone who's interested in piloting Trusted Connector programs can reach the broader outcomes, but that these were really important to spend and invest a lot of time and energy in. And so the next slide really shares the broader community level impacts that programs like NDC, who has now been around for 10 plus years, are able to start documenting because they spent and took their time in the first two components. And these are also really, this to me shows that the potential that the Trusted Connector program has. Utilizing this program has the potential to get us here. And I think it's really incredible to see, looking at outcomes from the Neighborhood Development Center, looking at outcomes from Prosperous Detroit, it's really incredible to see that the intentionality and the amount of work that has gone into these programs and what they have been able to do in communities. It's tangible, it's real, and it's wonderful that they have been able to, before this report ever existed, to track these, and then in order for us to synthesize it in this report. And so to the next slide will help us kind of talk about the attributes of a trusted connector. And Gracie, Mohit, and Raquel really did this for me. They mentioned so much, and it was really their interviews that brought this piece together. And so, you know, we've mentioned a few times now that the strong community roots is a really critical piece. And this could be place-based, so you live in the same neighborhood, or this can be along ethnic or racial lines. Language access is really important, not just the language, but also colloquially how people speak down to the dialect as well. Cultural connections and sharing these experiences with the folks that you are recruiting is really important. I think that's what NDC and working with community partners and having the community partners lead business training in their own spaces does a really good job at, is that there is a lot of comfort. And I know there was a question in the Q&A, but cultural connections and having people who understand and share shared experiences helps build that trust. Active outreach was another one. And this includes kind of what Raquel was talking about. You are canvassing, you are visiting spaces, you are meeting the community where they are at. We're conducting surveys, we're having one-on-one conversations. I think canvassing is really interesting because oftentimes you associate canvassing with political campaigns, and that's really where you're showing up to ask people, you're asking someone for something, rather than in our case, this is the other way around. You are here offering your full support and we are getting nothing in return. And so I think that that's a really wonderful example. And trust building is also really important. And I think that the biggest thing with trust building is keeping your word and your commitment to communities and making sure that we're not promising things we cannot give, but we are trying our best and being very open and forthcoming with folks, and that we stay true to what we are setting for, you know, what we're setting them up to expect from us. And that comes also with accountable. That comes with the last one, with the last attribute as well, with accountable, with good follow through. And this comes from the neighborhood development center's attributes of a community partners. You also want community partners to have the same buy-in as you do. You want it to be shared mutually. So I can move on.
Yeah, Nora, I'd like to, we only have a few minutes left. And since we've gotten a lot about, you know, what does make a great trusted connector, I'm wondering if we could go directly into how might small support business organizations or governments or others get started in this work, and what is next? What do you see on the horizon for this work?
So then, yeah, let's talk about it. We can go to the next slide then, I believe. And that'll really document where to start and then what folks from different sectors can do, right? There's still so much to document and research on trusted connectors. We can build networks and coalitions. We can increase funding for trusted connector programs and integrating trusted connectors in every aspect of our small business support ecosystem. So on the next slide, we kind of break down per sector what folks can do. So small business support organizations like CDFIs can write trusted connectors into their grants and their loans and make it a part of deploying that funding into communities. They can also hire and train and work with trusted connectors themselves, as we gave with the NDC example. Community-based organizations themselves can become trusted connectors and train to be trusted connectors, as well as help with advocacy. State and local governments can, there's a lot of SSBCI funds coming down now through states, and having some of that be invested into trusted connector programs is just really important in order to, again, have the funds reach our communities of interest. Same thing with foundations and corporate giving. I think funding is a huge way in order to allow these programs to launch. And so creating either one of two things: for every budget and for every grant and loan, creating budget for trusted connectors, or launching trusted connector programs that are established. So when that time comes for opportunities, that they can be funneled through the trusted connectors. And then advocates being the last piece, and advocating for this, as it is still, it's not new, but it's newly documented. And so getting the word out and spreading that awareness is really important. So Elena, I think that wraps up my time.
Okay, well, I know that we want to have some time for Q&A. So I want to thank you, Noor, for really bringing us the documented model of the work that folks like Raquel, Mohit, and Gracie have been investing in, along with Global Detroit and some of the other partners you mentioned. Steve, I'll turn it over to you and Anthony for questions.
Great. Well, thanks to both of our panels. Noor, it's amazing to see how you've been able to not just talk to the folks at Global Detroit, but talk to folks at the IRC and Neighborhood Development Center and Arizona First and all across the country, and glean really some kind of organization around these concepts and to put it into a format that welcoming initiatives across the country can look at and say, well, what could we do here? What do we need to know and how do we get started? I saw we had a great question as our first question from Sophia, who is noting that some of the immigrants they work with in Colorado in the Latinx community, are sometimes they're migratory and sometimes they're concerned about their status as well. And so I guess I think I misread the question. I think her question is about, how do you deal with people's status and providing these kinds of supports? That's the first question. And I'm actually going to say, there's a second question, which I thought of, which is, sometimes immigrants are migratory, right? Like they may be part of the agricultural industry, or they may be in other kinds of construction or seasonal jobs, the tourism industry. And so how do you capture those folks in sort of the trusted connector work? So two questions. First of all, how do you support immigrants who may be wary of participating in certain programs because of their status? And second question, how do you deal with migratory populations in trusted connector work? Anyone want to jump on that?
I'll jump in. I think one of the things that was noted is managing expectations. And I think it's very important to let folks know, especially when they have questions, is that I don't know what I don't know, but I'm definitely going to find out. We're in that situation right now in Detroit, and we're getting a lot of influx of migrants whose status we don't know. And it's also to do our own research in regards to finding out, especially when it's connected to your program or the intervention or resource you're attempting to connect the community with. For example, I'm working to connect some of our immigrant women to an apprenticeship program here in the city. So before I provide that information, I'm doing some of the research to find out, is immigrant status important? If so, what are that? So that when I do provide the information, I already have that answer. And so I think it's definitely doing your research with the partner that you're working to disseminate their information and answering those questions beforehand, but also working with local organizations who are working with those communities because they have been vetted and are the ones the communities will call once you have left their house. So therefore, it's very good to already make that relationship known with that organization so that once they do call, they will be able to vet you that you are speaking on something that it will work and will support them at the time. Hope that answers the question.
Raquel?
So dealing with status, and especially in this sort of arena with small business and because there was so much going on in Southwest Detroit and in Detroit at that time, with Prosperous Detroit being a lender, despite status, and helping people access home ownership. There was another lender here that came to Southwest that if you had something to secure a loan with, you could borrow up to $20,000. And I think that when you explain that there is a process to get to this other, end, like if we can crowdsource some lending, because there are lending circles in Latino communities and many communities, you know, or that you can crowdsource, you know, or you can access an auction house, you know, despite your status. Now you have access to lending. And even though we think like, wow, that takes like up to a year, people are extremely, I mean, you know, when people arrive here and they've left on purpose, you know, and maybe their, you know, status is in process, or maybe they are undocumented, and you're telling them like it's going to be a year for you to do this. It is not a barrier. They're like, okay, like I mean, I've got a plan. I've got like a checklist of things to do. People have access to lending. They have access, and we are learning from what they need. You know, we are learning from what they want, and we are able to describe that to the partners that Gracie's describing. You know, we also got to see some incredible other crowdsourcing, like people were buying houses on the auction and they were like, I'm going to come over to your house because I know how to do this. I'm a painter. Can you help me fix my roof? And we had one electrician that was signing, like reviewing all the plans. It's a very industrious population, you know, and so I think if you have the resources and you're talking to people about the resources, you know, there's usually an answer, you know, that sort of crops up. And so, you know, I think that identifying the barriers and then sort of committing to like figuring them out, you know, we did see a lot of that.
I will add that, you know, Global Detroit, and I would say my experience has been that many micro enterprise programs that are founded on building access and equity are often agnostic about people's status, meaning they don't ask and they don't care, and they're willing to lend and open participation to anyone. But the trusted connector really can provide that kind of comfort that this is a safe space, that it's not a place where they need to, you know, to be fearful of their status. We had a wonderful webinar last year at Welcoming America with Immigrant Rising, and I put a link in both the chat and in the Q&A. They've developed an entire business planning curriculum focused on undocumented entrepreneurs and what those folks need to know. So it's a standard business planning kind of curriculum, but it answers questions like, how do you open a bank account? How do you get paid as somebody who might be undocumented? You know, what to do about your taxes and self-employed income. So I put it up there. They're a wonderful organization. I don't know, Anthony, if you know whether or not we have that webinar recorded, but I just wanted to offer that as well. Other questions from the audience? And I guess I can't see you, so I think maybe put them in either the chat or the Q&A. So
I don't see any other questions just yet, Steve. And to your point about that webinar, I will look into that. And if I can find it, I'll share it out as part of the post-webinar recording.
Great. Why don't we jump to the poll, Anthony? And if there's, please at any time, if there's additional questions, put them in either the Q&A or the chat, and we'll get to them. And we're going to ask you guys a few questions just to see how what you learned. It's a pop quiz, if you will. So you should see in your if you're sort of listening to the Zoom, hopefully you can get back to your computer or phone, but you should see a poll in there. And there's 3 questions in there. The first one is, we wanted to see, after being in this webinar, how confident are you that this strategy of trusted connectors can really move the needle on helping immigrant communities and entrepreneurs get to resources? Second question for you to answer is, did you, and I don't know, have all 3 shown up? I have a different viewing in my screen because as a panelist, I don't know,
Yep,
are these?
they're on there.
Okay, great. So then the second question is just, did you hear some specific steps that you could take around deploying or utilizing trusted connectors in your work? And then the third thing is, would you or your organization be interested in technical assistance or doing more work in this area of trusted connectors for small business resources? That third question I think is really important. I'm beginning to identify potentially some national funders who might want to put resources into seeing these strategies proliferate among those serving immigrant communities across the country. And we'd love to find some Welcoming America members who might be interested in if they had resources to extend to trusted connectors in their own community, that they'd be willing to, connect what we call the small business support ecosystem, those organizations that do provide affordable business grants, loans, and technical assistance, and then with really trusted connectors within immigrant communities, and see if this strategy could be deployed with some impact across multiple communities. So I don't know. Hopefully you get your voting in, and then I don't know, Anthony, if we're able to pull up the poll.
Yeah, so just wanted to make sure we
Sure.
plateaued on responses here. And so I'm going to go ahead and close that now and share out those results there. So you can see probably on the first one about how confident they are in moving the needle after this webinar. 69% say a good amount and 31% a tremendous amount. So great influence on the webinar here. Second question, did you identify specific steps to take to deploy trusted connectors in your work? 87% said yes to 13% saying no. And the third question about looking for some technical assistance, that was an 80% yes and 20% no.
That's wonderful. Any other questions or comments from our audience? And if not, I'm going to turn it over to Anthony to close us out and get us out on time with 7 minutes remaining.
Yeah, definitely. And before we even do that, as Steve said, any final questions that any of you from the audience might have, please feel free to enter it either into the Q&A or into the chat. And while we wait on that, we do have a couple of moments here. I would love to turn it back to our panelists and obviously thank all of you for sharing all that you did today. It was a tremendous and very inspiring information and experiences that you shared. But if any of you have any closing comments that you would like to share with the audience, I'll just kind of open it up and turn it back to anyone that wants to do that.
I know Nora didn't get a chance to highlight this, but it was a saving grace for us at Global Detroit, and it still is for the work that I do now, is how we communicate with the communities that we serve. And so that's very important because I think, especially with immigrant communities, they still follow the ethnic newspaper, the local ethnic news, and not always an email. And so or necessarily a text message. One of the things that really helped us, it was WhatsApp groups, because a lot of immigrant communities still very much communicate with their friends, their groups. And there's so many groups that even the mainstream community partners don't know of, because the groups are being created inside groups within the WhatsApp groups. And when you want to disseminate information very quickly, the WhatsApp groups or the WeChats or whatever they use within that community has very much helped. And of course, we all know it is making sure we get our information translated. That really helps, but also the translators that we utilize, making sure they themselves can be a trusted connector in the community themselves. If we could utilize one that works within the community, that really helps also connect us to others and be able to share the information.
I have a 1-minute story or less. Recently, somebody reached out and said, where do I find the cement and workers in Southwest Detroit? And so I asked around, because I'm kind of out of that loop for, so I asked around, and somebody said, send that person to the Donut Villa on Verner and have them sit there every morning, like at 7 or 8 o'clock, and then you hope they'll get to know a person or two, and then ask that question again. And now they've got about 15 people. And now they're working on getting them commercial insurance, because we work with large industry, and we're asking them to use local folks, not big contractors, whenever they have, projects. So whenever I talk to industry, I'm like, who are you using from the neighborhood? And then they're like, oh, well, we don't know anybody. And now we're working to connect them to those folks. An old partner of mine, Bridget Espinosa, from the neighborhood, is now going to help some folks get commercial insurance because we want that money in the neighborhood, accessing bigger projects. But the whole thing is, like Gracie said, it's the old news. It's who knows where they are. It's the old little tiny, well, it's been updated, but this little donut place. And you kind of sit there until somebody says hi to you. And now you're connected.
It's amazing. Well, I know we are coming up on the top of the hour, but Steve, I will turn it back to you very quickly and see if you want to make any final comments as well.
Oh, thanks so much. I mean, first of all, we couldn't have done this report without the support of our funder, the New Economy Initiative, who's been with us in developing this program from day one. I know they're not here, but I do need to give them a shout out. We've also the Build From Within Alliance, which is a wonderful national network of micro enterprise programs committed to moving the line on equity inclusion, working in a few Welcoming America places, but also in African American, Native American, and rural communities as well. And then obviously Noor and Elena, who really did just an amazing job on this report. And this wouldn't have happened but for Noor's enthusiasm for this topic. And then, of course, all the panelists today. Anthony, I wanted to thank Welcoming America because you guys have just been such a great partner in enabling us to connect with folks all across the country. The last thing I'll say is, as Welcoming America members, you guys get office hours at Welcoming Economies. We love to get requests to meet with you. You see our email there, but also contact your people at Welcoming America. If you want to talk more about this, we are available. Global Detroit is Welcoming America's partner on the Welcoming Economies. We are more than eager to meet with you one-on-one. And I'm serious, and I want to build a broader network of trusted connector actors and enthusiasts across the country. And so don't be shy. Please reach out to us, stay connected, and let's together make sure that our small business programs across this country are inclusive of our immigrant communities. We cannot afford to have another, issue where we put nearly $800 billion through the Paycheck Protection Program. And so often our immigrant and other underserved communities were last to find out, were provided no technical assistance, no help in navigating, and it need not to be that. And, there are a lot of well-intentioned people trying to move the needle on equity and access, but who haven't thought through that final mile of delivering the system. They might create a great grant program or entrepreneurship opportunity, but they haven't invested in immigrant communities to get the word out and get them connected. And so that's what this is about. And we look forward to partnering with you. So thanks for being here today.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Steve. And again, a thank you to all of our panelists for sharing the great information. Just a quick reminder, again, this has been recorded, and we'll be sharing it out with you in the next few days, along with some links to the items that were referenced here today. We appreciate you being with us. If you have any questions, as Steve said, you've got a couple of emails on the screen there. We'll also share our Welcoming America email as well. Thank you all again for sharing a good chunk of your afternoon with us today. We really appreciate it. We also appreciate all of the amazing work that each of you is doing out in your individual communities to build those welcoming communities for everyone coming in as newcomers. Thank you all so much. Have a great rest of your afternoon and a great weekend ahead.